this kind of genre of music, you really want the vocals to be in your face. You don't want to have them be like off in the distance. You want to feel like the singer is just like grabbing you and like, I will not be, that kind of thing. Hey there, fellow music creators. Andrew Southworth, GenereStudios.com, here to teach you how to make better music and help you achieve your musical goals. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how I produce the vocals for this commercial metal type song I'm working on for my band, Over Design. And when I say commercial metal, I mean the kind of more poppy or catchy verse chorus kind of thing, metal. So if you think of maybe Linkin Park from back in the day, if you think of maybe A Perfect Circle even, they have kind of that structure, a more catchy type of metal that's more focused around singing. I would call it commercial metal or mainstream metal, and I'll put some more examples of bands that do this on screen. So I know a lot of you are vocalists or you're working on metal music, and this will directly apply to you, but even if you're more into the electronic music or any kind of other genre, these tips will help you because there really is no difference between producing all of these different genres. There are differences, but in terms of the actual tricks and the techniques, they're always the same. The only difference is how much you implement them, what ways you implement them, what things you focus on. So even if you're more into like EDM or something, learning these vocal production tips is a huge help because honestly, I kind of do the same thing when I'm working on EDM or metal. And it's just really about fine-tuning the values and seeing what works in your mix. So anyways, I have my computer set up. I have my Barber and Jade Good Mythical Morning shirt on. And let's go. All right, and we're in. So first, I'm just going to kind of play the chorus and the verse 2 just so you kind of have an idea of the song. And then I'll let you listen to some segments of the vocals only so you have an idea of what we're working with before I dive in and show you the techniques that I think are most important in these elements. So all right, so I think you get the idea. The choruses are these kind of big, loud moments that have all these different vocal stacks, and the verses are these kind of close, sentimental vocal parts. And so what I did is when I recorded the loud parts, I recorded them normal, so I had the microphone like a normal distance away. When I recorded the verses, I actually got like right up to the pop filter and got really close to the mic so that I could really capture all those little details of those quiet sounds. So like when I'm doing, I can't always seem to find... I'm like really getting into it and like kind of letting my voice just kind of do whatever. So I did a lot of takes and I picked the best one that had the most character. But really getting close up in the mic is something that's very important for those takes. So first, I think we'll start actually with that part, just so I can kind of solo it and show you what I mean, since we're already talking about that. I'm going to keep my waves tune on, and I'm not going to go into full depth about vocal editing and tuning in this, because I don't think it's what you're here for, but I will show you how this works. So if I hit play, you'll see this is going to start tracking the vocals.
Can't always seem to find your captured light inside.
So basically the orange is the original take and the green is the edited version. So for the most part, I'm hitting everything right. I think in the few of the more like vibrato-y parts that are really breathy, I got out of control, and so I pitch corrected them down to be more uniform, but still I'm not like slamming everything down to a pitch. I don't want it to sound auto-tuned. So even after the pitch correction, it's still off, which is what keeps it a little more real sounding. At least I think it does. So that's all I'm going to really say about waves tune, because it's really personal preference for how much you use. But the next big thing I use is Slate Digital VMR, or virtual mix rack. And this first thing I have, you can kind of ignore it. I'm using a Slate Digital VMS VL1 microphone, which is kind of like a digital microphone. That sounds silly, but it's a microphone that's made to have a very flat and even frequency response, and it comes with this separate preamp module that's supposed to be ultra linear. By the way, they took 6 months to deliver that, so thanks Slate Digital. Just a little jab there for you. But anyways, it's a fantastic mic, even without the preamp. I've been using it without it because I haven't had it. But the way it works is that since it's so linear, they can simulate inside the software different microphones. You can actually click these different mics and try them out, and it's very cool. So if you're just using a mic, completely ignore this part. This trimmer is just so I can get volumes right. And then I have an EQ, which isn't doing a whole lot. Like there's little nudges up and down. I wanted to add some more air to my sound. So
can't always seem to find your captured light inside to fuel mine.
So that's how it sounds as I start adding elements from this plugin. So really the main thing you want to notice from this is that I'm adding some EQ just to kind of get some sparkle and cuts out some of the junk in the low end. For example, everything under 80 hertz, you definitely don't need that. This compressor actually isn't really getting activated. This is just kind of like my standard thing. But if I was getting loud enough here, basically this compressor, this first compressor, is going to try to ride the vocal through the whole take, keep about 0 to 3 dB of attenuation. And this next compressor is riding at a higher ratio, and the goal is to have it only try to hit the peaks, to reduce those by somewhere between 0 to 3 dB. It's not the numbers aren't really that important. Just kind of use your ears, and depending on the take will depend on what you need. For this take, it's already pretty quiet, so it's fine, and I'd limit later. So I'm using this Revival plugin to add more shine to the vocals, this saturator to mix in some grit at 50%, and this FG Distressor model limiter that I'm using at a 6:1 ratio and kind of just slamming to make the whole take very even and very loud. So I'll play that again.
Can't always seem to find your captured light inside.
And a combination of the close miking and all these different dynamic control elements, especially the limiter, really make it sound like the vocals are in your face. And in fact, this particular patch I was using on the limiter is called In Your Face. So that's all I'm doing there. It looks like a lot, but it's very simple. EQ, compression, and limiting. Now, next we go into Nectar 3, which I think you're going to notice is where a lot of the character and a lot of the cool elements come into play. So I'll turn this off, and then we'll take a listen.
Can't always seem to find your captured light.
All right, so very dry, but it still sounds very good. It has most of the character of what the entire vocals have. So I'll turn on these elements one by one so you get a better idea of what each of them are doing. Now the first one, I have the pitch inactive, by the way, so the correction's off, because I'm already handling it in Waves Tune. In terms of harmony, what I'm doing is I'm adding an octave down, an octave up, and 2 unisons on the side. These are not perfectly aligned. And yeah, so that adds a lot. So I'll turn it on and off.
Can't always seem to find your captured light inside.
And it may sound somewhat subtle when you're listening to the whole mix, but it adds a lot of character, and it really thickens up the sound. You could double take this. You could record an octave down and record an octave up, maybe, and layer it. But the thing is, I didn't want to have it sound like there were 4 voices. I wanted it to sound like there was one voice that had a lot of thickness and depth. And that's something you really need to use something like this for. So next we go into EQ, which I'm really not doing much. I'm just scooping everything below about 100 hertz because you don't need it for the vocals.
Can't always seem to find your.
And you'll notice there's no difference, and that's because there's not supposed to be a difference. All that frequency information there wasn't contributing anything to the sound, so that's why we cut it. Next we go into the de-esser. The point of a de-esser is to make it so that every time you say a word with an S or a T or any kind of sound like that, a D even, it's gonna reduce the harshness of that by ducking down during those consonants.
Can't always seem to find.
And you know the exact values of this aren't important. I think the default in this software is like back here, but I found that does too much and it's hard to actually hear the lyrics, so I brought it up to about here. Then you want to play with the threshold to try to get, it's really up to the ear at that point. If you can still understand the words and it reduces the harshness, then you've done a good job. If you do it so that there's no harshness but you can't understand the lyrics anymore, you've done it too much. So next we go into the compressor, and this I'm not doing too much.
Can't always seem to find your captured light.
I'm really just hitting the peaks of every major word and just ducking them down by just a 2.5 ratio, so pretty small. So now if I hit this delay here, you'll hear the last little thing I'm adding inside of Nectar.
Can't always seem to find your captured light.
And it's kind of subtle. It's nowhere near the level of the reverb send. If I actually turn on my automation and I drop this down, this is my reverb send for the whole vocal bus. So the reverb send actually has on delay and SB 2016 reverb. So I'm just automating it through because I wanted some words to like really pop. So I'll let that play as you can see it.
Can't always seem to find your captured light inside to fuel mine.
So that's really personal preference. I wanted some words to really just like ring out and just keep going, especially near the end when there's this break and it like fades out until the chorus comes back in. So it's artistic. That's my point there. There's no good or bad answer for how to do that. Obviously, if you don't have all these softwares, you can substitute with whatever you do have. It just takes some trial and error, and you can do some research. And feel free to ask me if you're like, hey, I have this. Like, is there a way I could do it with that? And if I have it, I'll try to help you out. So now let's go to the chorus, and I'll show you the first part, and I'll just do the same thing. So of course, there's waves tune. And it's the same kind of deal where the green is the pitch corrected amount, the orange is the original. You always want to try to minimize your pitch correction so that it sounds real. If you have to do too much pitch correction, it's usually better to re-record the take, and that's what I did. Because at first I always use a lot, and then I go back and I redo takes and try to reduce it. So then we have our virtual mix rack, exact same thing. So I'll play it and you'll see.
I will not see the world decay. We all fall down and we crash and burn.
And the settings, I don't know if I touched some of them because this preset I actually have optimized for this kind of volume vocals. So you'll notice that the meters moved constantly for this 4:1 ratio, which is what I wanted. It only activated on the peaks a little bit, which is what I wanted. And then the limiter is getting hit pretty hard, but it's this part that I want to sound like slammed and in your face, just like the verses. This kind of genre of music, you really want the vocals to be in your face. You don't want to have them be like off in the distance. You want to feel like the singer is just like grabbing you and like, I will not be, that kind of thing. Now we're going to Nectar 3, and you're going to notice there's a trend here. Something's a little different. What I did is I have the octave down a little louder than I did in the verses, and I still have the unisons off to the side, but they're much louder. And then I have these octaves up that are on the sides as well. Now I didn't point this out in the last thing. I think I bumped up some time variation here and bumped down some pitch variation. Again, this is a Nectar thing, so it depends what software you're using. I did cut off the high end and the low end for the harmonies that I'm adding, because if you have all this high end and low end, like every time a consonant hits, it's gonna like add 5 of them. It's a little too intense. You want to hear the notes, and you don't want to hear all the words essentially. Like they're there, but you don't want all the attack. So next we go on to EQ, same kind of deal, not doing really anything. De-esser, exact same settings as before, and the compressor. Now that's not the whole story. That is just the individual vocal tracks, and that's the same for the other chorus part, and it's pretty much the same for every vocal take I do in this song. But the vocal bus is something that is incredibly important that I've learned in vocal processing. So the way it works is you have all your individual vocal tracks, and then you have a master bus or a group if you're in Ableton Live or some other softwares that contain that. So basically all those audio tracks get summed to this bus, and then on that bus you can process them together. And the reason you want to do this is because it helps all those things like sit together. So if you have harmonies, if you have doubles, if you have different parts that are like staggered, it helps them all have something in common. Just like if you were on Instagram or if you're in Photoshop and you have all these different elements on your picture that you want to have gel together. You might put them all on and then apply some filters on top of it so that the things you're putting on that are fake mesh better with the things that are real in your photo. So it's the same kind of idea with audio. You're getting all your vocal tracks and summing them to a bus, and then you're processing them together to provide some glue and some cohesiveness to the vocals. And I also do this with drums and guitars and even bass, pretty much everything. So, and synthesizers. So I'm going to show you what that is here. It's pretty simple. It's nothing severe. I use Neutron 2. You could also use any EQ combined with some kind of bus compressor. If you're in Ableton Live, you could actually use Glue Compressor. And then if you're using Waves plugins, you can use SSL Compressor, which is very good. I use that often as well. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting off the low end. You notice that I didn't really treat it too much before, but here I'm going everything below 134 hertz roughly is getting scooped out. And then I went through and I found some areas of harshness and I controlled them. So I'll play this.
I will not see the world decay.
And I just kind of, I start off by doing this, then I move it around until I find something very harsh.
I will not see the world decay.
And it might sound subtle, but it makes a big difference overall when you do this, especially the vocals, but it could be any of your instruments. And I'm boosting some high end just to kind of add extra sheen to the vocals. That's really not anything that is specific to every song. This is something I did for this song. Now the compressor, I'm doing a 1.6:1 ratio with a long attack relatively, and a kind of medium release, I guess.
I will not see the world decay.
And the idea is just to provide a little bit of glue so that everything in your track is gelling together. In this case, there's no layers, but there are different tracks that are staggered. And if there were differences between tracks, either purposefully or accidentally, it would be important. Now, I also have this exciter here, blended at 23%, so it's very subtle. I'll show you what happens when I change the blend, actually.
I will not see the world decay. We all fall down and we crash.
So it's just to add a little bit of warmth to the vocals because I wanted to have a little bit of grit. Obviously, I'm adding grit in my own voice, but often when you're hearing in the context of a mix, it might not come across. So just adding a little bit of saturation, a little bit of chaos. And then I'm doing it a little differently from the low end and the high end. The low end I'm doing more just kind of like the middle here. And the high end I'm doing a little more warmth because I wanted, to add warmth. Alright, so I hope you found this video helpful. I created this short playlist for you of other metal production techniques that I think will really help you out. Now, if you enjoyed this content, you'll probably like a lot of my other content. I upload every single Tuesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see more. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.